Good morning. I am David Iannucci. I'm the President and CEO of the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation. Welcome to the Prince George's County Business Webinar. Where do we go from here? Part 3. We are delighted to once again partner with our friends of the Prince George's County Chamber of Commerce to bring up-to-date information and resources to the county's business community. I'd like to thank in particular our friends David Harrington, Tom Farrisee, and Shaka Reed, and their team at the Chamber of Commerce for their collaboration and support. The Economic Development Corporation enjoys a terrific working relationship with the Chamber, and I want to thank them for that. I also want to thank our panelists, Jarryd Hawkins from the Office of United States Senator Ben Cardin from Maryland, and our County CAO, Tara Jackson, who will be pinch hitting for the County Executive this morning. Thanks so much, Tara. We're really looking forward to hearing from you this morning. I want to give special thanks to Adina Bradley and the good people at Southern Management for sponsoring today's event. Through Southern Management's generous sponsorship, today we are pleased to bring noted economist Anirban Basu from the SAGE Policy Group, and he will give us a look at Prince George's County's economy and a forecast for the future. I've known Anirban for many, many years, and he combines a quality unique to economists. He is both highly informative and at the same time entertaining. I'm personally looking forward to what Anirban has to say about Prince George's County's economy before COVID, during the pandemic, and going into the future. Before we start our program, I'd also like to thank the Prince George's County business community. Without a doubt, 2020 was a year like none other. No one could have predicted COVID-19 and its impact on our economy, both locally and of course, nationally. But our business community in Prince George's County has weathered the storm. County Executive Alsobrooks listened to the science, let it guide her decisions. She provided great leadership to Prince George's County when we needed it most. And we at EDC were given the tools we needed to pivot to COVID business assistance. With funding sources from Prince George's County, from the state of Maryland, and from the federal government, the Economic Development Corporation and our sister agencies, FSC First and Experience Prince George's County, provided more than $44 million in financial support to almost 2,000 businesses, helping to save over 4,000 jobs in Prince George's County. We also collaborated to provide seminars, training, and guidance in a wide variety of business operations to almost 1,000 businesses in the county. We recognize that dollars alone were not going to be the solution to survival through the COVID recession. Now, we won't forget to acknowledge that COVID was first and foremost a health crisis of unprecedented scope, and many suffered great losses and great pain. The loss of lives and the emptiness that many must endure for years will not be forgotten. For those of us in economic development, we were keenly aware of the hardship that businesses suffered through health-mandated shutdowns, loss of income, layoffs, and in many cases, permanent closures. The Economic Development Corporation takes great pride in reminding listeners that Prince George's County led all jurisdictions in Maryland with job growth for 6 consecutive years, where we added over 25,000 jobs. But we know that we lost almost twice that number of jobs between March and June of 2020 alone, and our unemployment rate surged. Our hospitality and retail industries suffered and bore the worst of that economic slowdown. But I want to be positive and look forward. We have recovered a good portion of those jobs since then. But like the national economy, we are not yet back to where we were before. But there are hopeful signs. Almost all construction projects in the county went forward in 2020. We are getting back to regular economic development. We're seeing a measurable increase in deals, in company expansions, in businesses seeking growth opportunities. And there are a few very big wins on the horizon. Our hottest sector is logistics, warehousing, and last mile centers, with land is in tremendous demand, and lease and sale rates are surging in the county. We are optimistic that pursuing data centers will lead to great results for Prince George's County. And I really want to thank the leadership of County Executive Alsobrooks and the County Council for giving us the tools to go after data centers. Importantly, I hope you all know that Prince George's County is home to the world's best capitalized quantum computing company, IonQ, located in College Park at the University of Maryland. We envision an entire ecosystem built around quantum computing in College Park. And also with the opening of the new hospital Largo, we want to see that area become a healthcare campus for the entire county. Now today you're going to hear from Senator Cardin's Regional Director, Jarryd Hawkins, as he talks about what the Maryland Congressional Delegation is working on in Washington, including the President's infrastructure bill. Senator Ben Cardin, the senior senator from Maryland and a member of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, was one of our champions on the federal level who helped write the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL Advanced Grant Program, and the extension of guarantees and reduced fees in two of SBA's largest loan programs. But before we hear from Jarryd, it is my pleasure to introduce Tara Jackson, Prince George's County's Chief Administrative Officer. Prior to assuming the CAO position, Ms. Jackson served as a Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Government Operations since the start of the Alsobrooks administration. She worked directly with DPI, the Office of Human Resources, and the Office of Central Services. She was instrumental in helping the county government shift to virtual operations at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring that all appropriate policies, training, and procedures were in place. Tara is truly an inspirational leader with a focus on getting things done. We are absolutely thrilled that she is in the position of CAO. Unfortunately, our county executive has been called away with an emergency and could not join us today, but we are delighted to have Tara come to us to talk about what Prince George's County is working on and where they are growing next. Tara, thank you for joining us today. Welcome. Are we joined by Tara?
Yes, we are. Good morning. We were having a little bit of difficulty with the with technology, but I am here, and thank you so much, David, for the kind words. I do wish that the county executive was able to join us, but she had a commitment, a last-minute commitment that she needed to attend to. But good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here today with you, with all of you. I want to thank you for joining us for this update and for your commitment to Prince George's County. I know that you're used to hearing words of inspiration from County Executive Alsobrooks. Our county is so blessed to have such an inspiring leader, so focused on the well-being of residents in every corner of our county. Over the past few months, we've worked together so closely to chart a course forward. But first, I want to thank our special guests who have volunteered their time to be with us today, as well as David Iannucci and our Economic Development Corporation for hosting this next update in their webinar series. I also want to thank groups like the Prince George's Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Prince George's Business Roundtable, who have been strong partners before and during the pandemic. And of course, I want to thank all of our businesses for your diligence and for partnering with us to make sure that we keep our residents and workers safe, or as we have navigated this past year. Today, I want to share how our county is positioning for recovery on a broad scale. Over the course of the pandemic, we took steps to plan for the future while paying attention to the immediate needs of our residents. As our pace of recovery speeds up, we must work hard to make our plans a reality while remaining flexible enough to respond to changing needs. This means we must work hard to make our vision a reality while maintaining a strong connection to what is happening in the present moment. This task is especially important now. While our prospects for recovery shine bright, there is still a high degree of uncertainty which we must consider. Our local economy is rebounding, but challenges remain. Even as businesses return to more normal operations, we need to make sure our recovery is robust. Prince George's County leads the state of Maryland in so many ways. We need to lead on job growth once again, as we did for 5 years before the pandemic began. Thanks to our successful vaccination campaign and our work with public health officials and others, the COVID-19 pandemic is under control in our county. But as you know, it is not yet over. There's a great deal of uncertainty still about variants and new outbreaks across the nation. And what we do not want is any sort of setback in our health and economic recovery. But the promise of a federal infrastructure bill brings us hope. Hope that our county will have additional resources to make lives better for residents. Hope that we will have more opportunities to create good paying jobs in Prince George's and the region. While we hope our federal counterparts will move forward with this promising bill, we also know that if we refuse to track the present, we will never be prepared for the future. So luckily, we've known this from the very beginning. And for the last year and a half, our county government has tracked the present. Through the Forward Task Force, we've re-examined our county and our government and how we plan to operate in the future. We have built on the work of our Forward Task Force to develop a comprehensive economic development strategy. Our economic development plan is designed to help meet demand in our county for things like housing, healthcare, and jobs. Through this plan, we are actively working to grow Prince George's County once again. Right now, we are stimulating the local economy with plans, partnerships, construction, and growth. The brand new University of Maryland Capital Region Medical Center is treating patients in a state-of-the-art facility, increasing access and improving the lives of our residents. And right now, our liaisons to the federal government, including individuals like Jarryd Hawkins, who is with us today, are working to make sure we are on the best possible footing. Because of our planning and our partners, Prince George's County is at the start of a strong recovery, one that is guided by a strong plan. Our economic development plan features sustainable housing and retail growth all over the county with a focus on transit-oriented development. And as you all have heard many times before, the Blue Line Corridor is the flagship for our county's growth future. As we work on projects that are affordable, livable, and walkable, we're also working to promote our local economy. We are increasing the number of people who live and work here by increasing the number of new employment opportunities. We are working with large institutional employers like the federal government to help grow jobs here in Prince George's County. And even before the pandemic began, this administration, the Brooks administration, was focused on increasing the commercial tax base. With projects like the National Harbor, Carillon, New Carrollton Crossing, the Discovery District, and AMZ Last Mile Delivery, we are making progress on our goal of growing commercial tax collections by $100 million. Increasing commercial tax revenue will help reduce the tax burden on our residents and make our county more resilient. This focus on resilience is key. We want our services to have a sturdy base as our county accommodates more residents than ever before. The number of people who will call Prince George's County home has grown steadily over the past decade, and demographers predict that the county will continue to grow. Plan 2035, the county's general plan, anticipates this growth. Projects like the Blue Line Corridor and transit-oriented development inside the Beltway help us reduce traffic and provide services. This makes our county more livable and dynamic as we grow. At a high level, this is our strategy to make growth work. However, this growth in housing cannot come at the cost of affordability. Prince Georgians deserve to stay in Prince George's County. And that's why, as the number of Prince Georgians grows, we must take steps to preserve affordable housing. We are making 75% of 26,000 new residential units affordable. These homes will be affordable to households with less than 120% of area median income. We want to put permanent housing in reach for every Prince Georgian. Inside the Beltway, Prince Georgians need greater access to healthy foods. This is something that our county executive has been talking about from day one. Foods like fresh fruits and vegetables. That's why we are creating incentives for grocery stores to locate in these communities in the long term, because our communities cannot grow right if they do not have a healthy diet. And we are partnering with the Capital Area Food Bank to bring mobile grocery trucks into our food desert, a project that you will hear more about in the very near future. As we build these new equitable and amenity-rich communities, we're also focused on placemaking. We want more destinations throughout our county that give our residents variety. This means more activities, more access to the arts, more retail, more entertainment, along with more transit access. During the pandemic, we all experienced our share of hardship. And as we worked together to survive, I think we all had a chance to imagine a brighter future. One where the pace of our lives felt different. A future full of new activities to experience with friends, a future with plentiful options for housing and for work. A future with greater access to healthcare. A future where we spend less time commuting and more time with our families. With our economic development plan, we are building this future with an immense focus on equality. 10 years from now, as we look back at our county, our state, and our nation, we will remember the tumultuousness of this pandemic and the course that we charted to grow in this new American era of recovery. We won't be judged by our success in dollars and cents. We will be judged on our ability to create greater access for all. Every resident of Prince George's County must have a place to call home and a way to provide for their family. Every resident of our county must have access to education and healthcare. Every resident must have access to healthy food. And every resident should feel safe and secure in their community, no matter what they do for work, where they were born, or how they look. But we can't do it alone. And I'm asking all of you here today to take this vision of equity with you as you consider new retail space, new home construction, and new investments. With more growth comes more opportunity. And I'm asking everyone who has a chance to benefit from this growth to ask themselves how they can use those opportunities to promote the vision that we have here in Prince George's County. Again, I want to thank the Economic Development Corporation. I want to thank all who have joined us here today. And I want to thank you all for your commitment to our shared future. On behalf of the county executive, we will build a brighter future for all in Prince George's County. Thank you.
Tara, thank you very, very much for those remarks. And I appreciate you not only stepping up for the county executive, but for all the work that you're doing. You're one of the most important positions in county government, and we have great respect for what's on your shoulder. There are some potentially some questions. I don't know if you're open to, if they'll come through the Q&A on the box, but the first question actually came through about data centers that I can address, but I wondered if there are any questions for Ms. Jackson. Doesn't look like.
And David, you know, I would love to stay and answer questions. The problem is I'm due at a COG meeting 2 hours away. I'm sorry.
All right. You have a retreat this weekend, right?
Yes, the Council of Governments is calling. So I do need to run, but certainly I'm available to all. And if anyone has any questions that need for me to answer them, I certainly will get back to you with a response.
Well, why don't we appreciate very much your time, and we'll obviously let you go. Thank you for your continued leadership, and thank you for giving us the time this morning. So very, very good luck to you over the weekend too. I know you got a busy weekend.
Thank you, David, and thank you all for joining. Take care.
All right. There are two questions that I've seen. The first one is about data centers, and we have identified data centers as a great growth opportunity. That began in March of 2020 when the Maryland General Assembly passed legislation that allowed Maryland to compete with 38 other states that already exempted data centers. But we still learned we had a long way to go to compete with Virginia, which already has 85% of the world's internet traffic. So some legislation has been passed that allows data centers to move along quicker, but all environmental protections are still going to be required. It just allows the process to move quicker. So we're very, very positive about that. There was a question about maglev, and I'm afraid that's not a question that I know the answer to in terms of the number of jobs for maglev. The maglev really goes under Prince George's County if it ever gets approved, and I'm not sure we have any data at all on jobs from maglev. Lori, I think that's all I see. I know that I was remiss in missing some of the housekeeping functions, and I know there's a slide on that. I don't know if you want to go back to that, but this session is being recorded. It will be posted on the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation website, and I think on the county executive's website as well. And again, as you've seen, if you have any questions, put them on the Q&A. I think right now we're going to move on, and we want to thank County Chief Administrative Officer Tara Jackson for her time and for her commitment to the residents of Prince George's County. Let's now transition to our next presenter. It's really my pleasure right now to introduce my friend, someone I admire for his leadership, and the Prince George's County president of the Prince George's County Chamber of Commerce. Again, as I said, the Economic Development Corporation, the Chamber have established a truly strong working relationship. David Harrington, welcome. Thank you for your support, for your leadership, and I now pass the baton to you.
Thank you, David, and good to see you and everyone in this meeting. I certainly want to thank your team in putting this together, and certainly the team at the Chamber for putting this together as well. This is a very important discussion, and certainly appreciate the attention that this is getting. Before I introduce Jarryd, who's a great friend and someone who I have deep admiration for, I wanted to, if I can, David, there was a question about redevelopment and from one of the panelists, Stephen Tucker, and as chair of the Redevelopment Authority, I wanted to, if I may, just spend just 30 seconds on answering that question. And what I would say to Mr. Tucker, that the county is undergoing a robust development and redevelopment, and particularly in the Suitland area, the redevelopment of Glen Arden. There's now a RFP that's gone out for looking at, now that the hospital has switched from Cheverly to now Largo, there's a RFP that's out on the street on redeveloping that whole site with mixed use development. And also in the Forestville area, the Redevelopment Authority is working with PEPCO to redevelop Forestville, and then way down the road, certainly the Glendale area, we're looking at redevelopment of that as well. So Ms. Tucker, I hope that answers your question. If you'd like to send me something privately, I'd be happy to go into more detail. But I certainly agree with you that the county is following a dual track. We're not only looking at new development, but it's being very aggressive around redevelopment as well through the Redevelopment Authority and the Revenue Authority. So I hope that answers your question. And of course, what I would say is that in closing, what I would say, as you allude to in your question, that redevelopment certainly then takes into account existing infrastructure and does not add on to our infrastructure. So, but again, seek me out privately if there's any other information that you need. But now I'll get on to the task at hand, and who's again a very good friend of mine, someone who's doing an outstanding job in Senator Ben Cardin's office. He's the regional director in his office. He's been doing this kind of service work for a long time. He used to be within doing the constituent services director with then Chair Todd Turner. So he is someone who's very familiar with the county and very familiar with our development and our economic scheme, and who's played a key role in really bringing us together around the infrastructure bill, and was outstanding in passing on information when we needed about the stimulus bill and other relief bill during COVID. And so I want to bring now to the audience Jarryd Hawkins from U.S. Senator Ben Cardin's office, who really will discuss the infrastructure bill, which I would pose, Jarryd, that I have to say I'm biased on the infrastructure bill. I hope it passes, and I hope people get their act together to get this done as quickly as possible. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring on Jarryd Hawkins, who will apprise us of where we stand with the infrastructure bill. But thank you very much, Jarryd, and good to see you.
Good to see you too, David, and thank you for the introduction. And I think in this moment, this COVID moment, this shutdown, we've been able to build a good friendship. Same thing with David Iannucci, built in the mutual interest of supporting Prince George's businesses and our local economy. Again, my name is Jarryd Hawkins. I represent Senator Cardin in Prince George's County. He sends his regards and wishes that he could be here, and he's so proud of all the work that Prince George's County, the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Corporation, and county government and Prince George's County businesses have done, coming out of COVID, beating back the virus, and coming out of a shutdown. So I have a few slides. Also, below you see my contact information. If anyone has any questions or issues that you want to raise, or you want some more information on it, anything, that's my cell phone number. That's my email. Please feel free to reach out to me. Next, please. So want to acknowledge our county executive, Angela Also Brooks, for leading us through this shutdown and through this COVID moment. It's a tough task to lead during a pandemic, and I don't think any elected official asked for that. But it's her responsibility, and she took the tough questions, and she stood up and she led, I think, with dignity and honor. So, and I think what we have gained and where we are today is due in part to her leadership. Again, David Harrington and David Iannucci, your partnership is invaluable. To the Economic Development Committee, Tom Adenia, the co-chairs, thank you so much for allowing me to join this committee, and all my committee mates, thank you for your partnership, and it means a lot to me and the Senator's office as well. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about Senator Cardin. He's the senior senator in Maryland. He was elected in 2006, and he's the chairman of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, which obviously creates a synergy between the EDC and the Chamber of Commerce and organizations like FSC First. Also, in this moment when we're talking about infrastructure, he's a senior member on the Environmental and Public Works Committee, which is very influential during this infrastructure conversation. Next, please. So I just want to share a few pictures of the senator around Prince George's County, meeting with small businesses or talking with small businesses. As we all know, the Prince George's County and Maryland have a very robust small business community, a very robust minority and women-owned business community. And I think that that's something that we should be proud of, and that's something that we should tout. And the senator is proud of that. So all these stops are in Prince George's County. There's businesses that have pivoted during COVID. There's businesses that have provided vaccine and testing services to our communities and partner with local government. There's a business here that provides EV charging stations, electric vehicle charging stations, that's manufactured right in Prince George's County. And the senator is proud of these businesses and these firms. And I think, we should all be proud of the work that we've done with regards to small business. Next slide, please. So a piece of information that I think is very helpful, and we're going to have the link in the chat. Also, feel free to reach out to David Harrington or David Iannucci or myself. Information is on the first slide, and I'll put it in the chat as well. This is Senator Cardin's Maryland Minority Small Business Guide. And in it, you'll find information, SBA programs for access to capital, how to be awarded contracts, access to information for small business development centers, women business development centers in Prince George's County and across the state. So I just think that this is very important and relevant information that could be helpful to a lot of people. So I wanted to share that. Also, take a look at the numbers for minority businesses in the country. We got a lot of towns and municipalities in Prince George's County that lead on that. Also women-owned businesses as well. You see the real leadership in Prince George's County on that across the nation. Next slide, please. So for a federal update, I think that there's three things that I think are really important that I wanted to highlight. One being COVID-19. Next slide, please. And all the progress that we've made is important and is commendable. And we've seen businesses pivot from fabric distributors or fabric manufacturers making masks and distilleries making hand sanitizers. We've seen nonprofits help those in need and public and private partnership to get us through this moment. But I warn folks to not let up on the gas. The Delta variant is real. It's in Maryland. We see other parts of the country that are suffering from it because they're not as confident in the vaccine. There's bad information being spread. And there is an opportunity, if we don't do what we need to do, where we could find ourselves in a bad situation in the fall when kids go back to school, the flu season comes around, and people start to become more in contact with each other. The mayor of New Orleans has instituted a mask advisory. President Biden, he said that students may need to wear masks while going to school in the fall. And there's not too often that I'm agreeing with Senator McConnell, but he's worried and really pushing people to get the vaccine. Same thing with Sean Hannity, who is another person I rarely agree with on things, but continue to push to beat back this virus, continue to take care of one another, continue to understand that, we are our brother's keeper and we are our sister's keeper. And we have to continue to fight to beat this virus. Next slide, please. So I think what everyone wants to talk about, everyone wants to learn about is the bipartisan infrastructure package. Now, this package is $575 billion in new spending. It's bipartisan. There's an agreement upon the framework. And this is more physical infrastructure investment. So we're talking about water systems, electric vehicle charging, access to broadband, roads, bridges, and dams. These opportunities will be granted to state, local, and municipal governments, which will trickle down to as opportunities for small businesses and businesses alike. There is an agreement on what we should be investing in, excuse me. The question now is, how do we pay for it? The president and Senate Democrats feel that we should raise revenues by increasing taxes on the wealthiest. And that includes people that make $400,000 or more per year. Republicans think that we should raise the money in other fashions. So that's the debate right now. I wish that there was more information or more progressive movement on it. The leader Schumer and the president and Senator Cardin are pushing to get this done, but this is a huge package. There's a lot to this, and quite honestly, I don't think is the best practice to try to push this thing through and rush it through. I think we should be prudent and making sure that we get this right, because this is a lasting investment that's going to last generations. Next slide, please. So the bipartisan infrastructure package is part of President Biden's plan, Build Back Better plan, which is a total $4.1 trillion package that includes more human infrastructure. So, you know, government, the president, Leader Schumer, Senator Cardin, they've heard the cries and concerns about access to childcare, access to pre-K, making sure college is affordable and in some instances free and accessible to all. Also, seniors being able to age with dignity and grace, and also making sure that programs like Medicare are fully funded and are expanded. Dental and vision insurance should be included in Medicare. So there's the $3.5 trillion human infrastructure package is a little bit more partisan. There's a larger debate on that. It's probably going to get passed on reconciliation, which means that I'm sure a lot of you all in the news, watch the news and hear about this, but it's probably going to be passed on reconciliation, which means instead of 60 votes that in the Senate that induces bipartisanship, it will get passed with a simple majority. And it's controversial, but the president and Senate Democrats feel that that's what's necessary to push this country forward. That's what's necessary to raise people out of poverty and to understand and tackle our future and the challenges that come with the future. Excuse me, I just got an alert. We have spent countless dollars and resources and lives fighting wars across the world, defending democracy, and it's the opinion of Senator Cardin and the president that it's time that we do some nation building. This is also an idea that goes back to the Obama administration. So I would tell folks to, be prepared, get prepared as much as possible, follow the news. I wish I had more information, progressive information on where we're going with this, but it's we're in the debate about how this thing should look. So next slide. Regarding small business, the senator, like I said, he's the chairman of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. He has a huge interest in making sure that small businesses get equitable access to opportunities in the infrastructure package, especially disadvantaged businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, to make sure that everyone gets a fair share, not out of sense of fairness, but not only out of sense of fairness, but also understanding that when everyone has a fair share, it makes our country better. It spreads the wealth, and we're able to participate in the economy in a better fashion. Also, I've had conversations with the senator about the 8A program. I've spoken with some of you all about the 8A program and what changes could be made. How can we make it better? Some folks have told me that the 8A program is the graduation that no one wants. So that is something that the senator is concerned about and sees as an opportunity for us to make some change. It may not be a legislative opportunity, it may be a legislative fix, it may be agency fix, but that's something that's at the forefront of the senator's agenda. Finally, reauthorizing the Minority Business Development Agency. Currently, right now, the MBDA is housed in the Department of Commerce. It doesn't have dedicated funding. And so what that does is at times it can leave this agency that has so much potential to do so much good, it can leave it toothless. So Senator Cardin, along with other senators in the Small Business Committee, like Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey, have introduced legislation to provide dedicated funding, allow the MBDA to stand alone and be its own agency, and make sure that it has everything it needs to support minority firms. So next slide. So thank you all for listening in. Again, thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and the EDC and everyone for your support and collaboration. I'm happy to be here. And it's truly, where we are today is truly representative of the work and citizenship that we've provided one another to, and the sacrifices that we've made to get us to this point. So I feel we should all be proud of ourselves, but also continue to fight to push back this virus and take care of one another. Everyone be safe, and thank you again.
Thank you, Jarryd. We appreciate that. We'll now bring back Mr. David Harrington to introduce our guest speaker. My apologies. We are actually bringing back Ms. Adenia Bradley, who will introduce our guest speaker.
Adenia, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you again, Lauren. Southern Management Companies is proud to introduce the guest speaker today. Mr. Basu is Chairman and CEO of Sage Policy Group, an economic policy consulting firm headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland, with an office in Indonesia. In 2014, he was appointed as chair of the Maryland's Economic Development Commission by Governor Larry Hogan. Mr. Basu was named by the Business Journal, the Baltimore Business Journal, as one of the region's 20 most powerful business leaders in 2010, and twice named by the Daily Record as one of Maryland's 50th most influential people. I have been waiting all week to hear him speak, and I'm excited to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Anirban Basu.
Righto, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. Thanks to Southern Management for its sponsorship. Thank you to the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation for inviting me. I'm going to talk about the economy today, where we are, and then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So if you can go to that next slide, please, that first slide of my presentation. Here it is. So my presentation today is entitled Anirban Basu and the Chamber of Data. This is a Harry Potter themed presentation. You'll see that theming throughout this presentation, whether you like it or not. It's sort of baked into the cake. Next slide, please. Now let's jump right into the economy. Obviously, the single most influential factor shaping economic outcomes continues to be COVID-19, as it turns out, at least globally. I know that we Americans have seen some light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is becoming a little bit dimmer with that Delta variant. But in much of the rest of the world, vaccinations have not proceeded as they have in the United States. We're very fortunate to be home to companies like Pfizer, which is headquartered in New York, and Moderna, which is headquartered in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now, there have been some behavioral shifts, of course, during the pandemic. And one of the things I want to talk about is the extent to which some of these shifts in behavior are permanent, because that means that the pandemic has long-lived economic impacts. Next slide, please. Now, this is a map from the International Monetary Fund. It's backward-looking. It reflects 2020 global economic growth. And what you see here is that green is good, because green signifies that economies grew in 2020. And there is some green here, most notably in China, that economy growing 2.3% last year, also east of the Caspian Sea, in natural resource intensive societies like Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, also in Western Africa, in nations like the Ivory Coast, also quite natural resource intensive. Red is bad. because red signifies that the economy shrank in 2020. You can see North America bathed in red. I can offer you some additional granularity around this. Next slide, please. This is the same source, International Monetary Fund, but now this actual figure, statistics, if you look toward the bottom of the slide, you can see that estimated 2.3% growth rate for the Chinese economy. The US economy shrinks 3.5% last year. Not the worst performance in North America. That dubious distinction belongs to the Mexicans, that economy shrinking more than 8%. And North America, not the worst performer. That distinction might belong to the Europeans, with the French economy shrinking more than 8% last year, the Italian economy nearly 9%, the Spanish economy 11%, and with the United Kingdom suffering its worst economic year since 1709, that of course near the Great Frost. Nonetheless, we shrank economically last year. But for me to indicate that the US economy shrank 3.5% last year would be A, accurate, but B, would miss out on a ton of nuance. Next slide, please. There were moments during which, of course, the US economy was perfectly dismal in performance, but there are other moments during which the US economy bounced back with amazing ferocity. This is quarterly gross domestic product. Now, this is one of my more intense slides, more complicated slides. There are two colors of bars here, blue and red. The blue color bars, again, this is quarterly gross domestic product. The blue color bars stretch through the fourth quarter of 2019. Now, you'll remember that as we marched into 2020, marched into last year, there was momentum in the economy. And indeed, for many chamber members, other business people in Prince George's County, the number one issue was finding workers. Can't find workers to support my growth. This was true in retail, restaurants, professional services, all kinds of categories, construction, manufacturing. Now, we shut down the economy during the first quarter of 2020. There are 5 red colored bars here. They are indexed to the right-hand vertical axis, and they are the first, second, third, and fourth quarters of 2020 and the first quarter of 2021. During the first quarter of last year, the US economy shrinks 5% on an annualized basis, largely because of the last 3 weeks in March when we shut down the economy. During the second quarter of last year, the US economy shrinks 31.4%. That was a devastating quarter. And around that time, there was a raging debate in the economics community about what the initial phase of recovery might look like. Would it be U-shaped, L-shaped, Nike swoosh, check mark, square root, hockey stick? It was a straight up V for vibrancy or vitality or a partial restoration thereof. For during the third quarter of 2020, the US economy bounces 33.4%. That's that big, lofty vertical bar that you see there. Now, for reasons we'll get into, during the fourth quarter of last year, the US economy begins losing momentum, growing only a bit more than 4% on an annualized basis. Stimulus is injected into the economy on December 27th of last year, then again on March 11th of this year, and that helps to increase the pace of growth to 6.4% during the first quarter. Now, we're in the third quarter presently. The second quarter is completed, but we don't yet have second quarter estimates for GDP growth. The best guess is that this country grew somewhere between 7 and 8% during the second quarter, but we'll know more about that on July 30th. Next slide, please. Now, that said, despite the growth enjoyed during the latter stages of 2020, it is still the case that the economy ended last year smaller than it began the year. And there are many implications to a shrunken economy. Let's talk about some of those, and let's begin with a discussion of the US labor market. Next slide, please. Same setup on this slide, red colored bars and blue color, no, there you go. Red colored bars and blue colored bars, same setup. But now this is monthly employment change in America. Now, the last blue colored bar here, reading from left to right, the last blue colored bar on the right is February of 2020. February of 2020 represented the culmination of a 113-month period during which America added jobs each and every month, with only one exception, February of 2019. And over that 113-month period, this nation added 22 million jobs. We drove the official rate of unemployment down to 3.5%. That was a 50-year low. You'd have to go back to December of 1969 to find unemployment as low as it had been pre-crisis. And just to give you a sense of how long ago that was, the Orioles were good back then. It was a long time ago. I'm from Baltimore, I know such things. The first red color bar is March of 2020. Now, in March of 2020, as we shut down the economy, America loses 1.7 million jobs. Again, those red colored bars are indexed to the right-hand axis. But that 1.7 million figure is misleading. Why? because the so-called reference week, the week in which the underlying survey was conducted, was relatively early in March. So a lot of the jobs lost in March didn't show up in the March jobs report. They would show up in the April 2020 jobs report, a month during which America lost 20.7 million jobs, according to that employment report. So if you do the math on that, between March and April of last year, we lose 22 million jobs as a country, precisely the same number of jobs we had during the previous 113 months. And around that time, the Wall Street Journal conducted a survey of economists, mostly economists who work for large US financial institutions, not small business operators like myself. And those economists collectively projected that we would lose another 8 million jobs in May of 2020. But we did not lose 8 million jobs in May of 2020. We added 2.8 million of them, followed by 4.8 million jobs added in June, and 1.7 million jobs in July, and 1.6 million jobs added in August, and 716,000 jobs in September, and 680,000 jobs in October. Fabulous. Now, again, for reasons we'll get into, during that fourth quarter of last year, this economy loses momentum. And by December, we're actually losing jobs. Again, stimulus December 27th, stimulus March 11th of this year, and we've been adding jobs ever since, and had a really nice jobs report in June with 850,000 jobs added. Next slide, please. Now, don't get me wrong, though I would suggest to you that the early stages of recovery were V-shaped, we're still down 6.8 million jobs compared to February of 2020, when the crisis was not really a crisis in America. Not yet, it's not, at least economically. These horizontal bars represent the number of jobs lost by each of these industry categories over that 16-month period, February 2020, pre-pandemic crisis, to June of 2021, last month for which we have these data. So what I'm trying to say here is a sector called leisure and hospitality has lost roughly 2.2 million jobs. That's your restaurant worker and your hotel worker, but you can see every major sector of the economy has lost jobs over this 16-month period. Next slide, please. Maryland. Our state, between February of 2020 and June of 2021, you're going to see that period a lot in terms of comparison, 16 months, has lost 145,000 jobs, or 5.2% of job totals. You can see, mimicking the nation, number one sector losing jobs, leisure and hospitality. Again, your restaurant and hotel workers by and large, but every major sector of the economy has lost jobs. So again, even though the initial phase of recovery could be characterized as V-shaped, at least I would characterize it as such, again, please don't get me wrong. We have a long way to go to recuperate, which is, of course, why economic development in Maryland and in Prince George's County and in elsewhere in our great state is so important right now. A lot of people have been left behind. We're behind coming into the pandemic, and are now further behind. And we'll talk more about that in the Prince George's County context in a moment. Next slide, please. Washington metropolitan area, which includes areas outside of Maryland, but includes Prince George's County. 146,000 jobs lost between February of 2020 and June of 2021. You can see all these data in that caption box down below. The Washington metropolitan area has lost 4.4% of its job totals. The nation during that same 16-month period lost 4.4% of its jobs. Now you might say, Anirban, how is that possible? We're home to the federal government, all this stable agency employment, all these defense contractors. Here's Amazon coming into the region. How could we not perform better than the nation in terms of preserving our pre-existing base of employment? Because Washington Metro has a massive leisure and hospitality sector. And by the way, Prince George's County does too. Prince George's County is an affluent jurisdiction. I know that there's a lot of discussion right now about inequities and so on and so forth, and how much people have suffered during the pandemic, depending on how they started out socioeconomically during the early stages of the pandemic, those kinds of things. I understand that. We want to talk about inequality as well, but it's an affluent county overall. The median household income approaching $90,000. So because of that, there's a lot of spending power, and that translates into a fair number of restaurants and therefore a lot of restaurant employment. So you see that across the Washington region, which is an affluent region. You see that in Prince George's County. Next slide, please. This gives you some more regional perspective. So this is employment growth for the 25 largest metropolitan areas in America. Again, a comparison period, February 2020 versus June of 2021. This is a mistitled slide. There is no growth here. Every one of the nation's 25 largest metropolitan areas lost jobs during this period. And you can see where Baltimore ranks. Baltimore actually held up better. Why? Baltimore also has a lot of government employment, lots of medical researchers, but not a huge leisure hospitality segment relative to Washington, D.C. And number one is San Antonio, Texas. That's Greg Abbott is the governor of Texas. Some governors were very aggressive in keeping their economies open even during the worst of the crisis. A lot of them were Southern governors. So you see Dallas at number 3, Tampa at number 4, tied for number 4. That's Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. At number 6 is Phoenix. Governor of Arizona is Doug Ducey. At number 7, Atlanta. The Georgia governor is Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp was the first to reopen his economy, happened on April 20th of last year. And sometimes you will hear Georgians suggest that we never really shut down our economy. You won't hear that so much from folks in Atlanta, as it turns out, but from other parts of Georgia, you will hear that statement made. So some governors very focused on the employment and economic outcomes. Other governors more focused on the public health outcomes. I'm not telling you which approach is better. I'm just suggesting the obvious, which is that such distinctions in public policy making have economic implications. At number 25, toward the bottom of that second column, Orlando. You say, Anirban, sir, what's your narrative? That's Florida. That's Governor Ron DeSantis, same state, same governor. What gives? What gives, of course, is the structure of the Orlando metropolitan area economy, which is about theme parks, leisure hospitality, retail, trade. See, if you've got social distancing of any kind, and of course Disney made its own decisions during that period, you're going to have a lot of unemployment. At number 23, San Francisco. At number 24, Los Angeles. Who's the governor of California? Why, it's the wickedly handsome Gavin Newsom. Himself could be a Hollywood actor. Very aggressive in keeping that economy shut down. At number 22, New York Metro, Governor Andrew Cuomo, his counterpart in New Jersey, Phil Murphy. New York City, of course, was an early stage viral epicenter. They had to shut down mass transit, for instance. And when you shut down mass transit, you end up shutting down much of the New York metropolitan area economy. So these results prevail. Next slide, please. Unemployment, we're back down to 5.9% from that April 2020 peak of 14.7%. During the early stages of the pandemic, women suffered relatively more economically because they are more invested or involved with industries like leisure and hospitality, retail trade, salons, daycare centers, private schools, public schools, home health, so on and so forth. But now what we see is that the female rate of unemployment in America is now back below the male rate of unemployment in America. And we've made a lot of progress here. And again, you can see evidence of that V-shaped recovery, at least if you flip this line upside down, because less is more here, the lower the number, the better. So if you flip this line upside down, you would see that we really have come back a long way. Next slide, please. Maryland unemployment rates by count, you can see a decent number of Maryland's 24 major jurisdictions now has unemployment back below 5%, 10 of them. Prince George's County has the highest rate of unemployment among 24 major Maryland jurisdictions, but don't view this purely negatively. To be unemployed, you have to be looking for a job. So this is an indication that lots of folks in Prince George's County are ambitious, want to get back into the workforce, looking for a job. I mean, it's not purely good news, don't get me wrong, but, and again, it does remind us how important economic development is at this time. But at a time when employers are having a difficult time finding workers, having some available workers is not purely a bad thing. Next slide, please. You can see here that we have seen some real disparities across not just socioeconomic dimensions, but also ethnic and racial dimensions. So this is unemployment rates for various demographic groups. The light blue colored bars represent the pre-recession unemployment rate. That's the January of 2020 unemployment rate. The red colored bars in the middle represent the peak unemployment sustained in April or May of last year. And then the dark blue colored bar is June of 2021, the last month for which you have data. And you can see, for instance, if we look at the Black/African-American rate of unemployment, it starts out at 6.1% pre-recession, rises to 16.7%, now back down to 9.2%, but that's meaningfully higher than, let's say, the unemployment rate for Caucasians and Asians. You can see the Hispanic rate or Latino or Latinx rate of unemployment rising to nearly 19% during the worst of the crisis, now back down to almost 7%. Next slide, please. This is a graph of the Prince George's County unemployment rate over time. So there has been progress made. There was a time when the unemployment rate last year was well above 10%. But of course, we want to see more progress and try to get back to where we had been. Well, you can see where we had been pre-crisis was around a 4% rate of unemployment in Prince George's County. Next slide, please. This is Prince George's County employment by place of residence. So of course, there are many jobs in Prince George's County, but there's also a population in excess of 900,000 people in Prince George's County. And this gets at the number of people who live in Prince George's County and who are employed. And what this says is, if you look at one of these captions here, it says between February of 2020 and May of 2021, the population of people with a job living in Prince George's County fell by almost 53,000 or 10.5%. So again, lots of work to be done to connect people to job opportunities. Thankfully, there are lots of job opportunities available in the economy, but for all kinds of factors, it's been taking some time to fill those job openings and to bring that unemployment rate lower faster. Next slide, please. So one of the other aspects of the pandemic, of course, was that the government was very much involved, or the federal government in particular, very much involved in the economy. So if you're familiar with the Harry Potter books and movies, you know that the government of witches and wizards is the Ministry of Magic. Now, I don't know how much magic comes out of Washington, D.C. I can tell you a lot of money did last year. Next slide, please. 3 major stimulus packages passed last year. The first was signed by Donald Trump on March 27th, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act. This was a $2.2 to $2.3 trillion package, direct payments to Americans, enhanced and extended unemployment insurance, and of course, paycheck protection. Less than a month later, more money is infused into the economy to bulk up healthcare delivery capacity and also for paycheck protection. But then for many months after April of last year, no new major stimulus was injected into the economy. And so as that stimulus works through the economy, we boomed during the summer months, but then the economy started to lose momentum, loses momentum during that fourth quarter. Sensing that economic momentum was falling apart, Donald Trump signs on December 27th the Consolidated Appropriations Act, a $906 billion package, again, more direct payments to Americans, more loans and grants to businesses, more extended and enhanced unemployment insurance. Now, all this news has been trumped by the latest stimulus package. Next slide, please. Signed by Joe Biden on March 11th, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which, among other things, between Prince George's County and its municipalities will send about $300 million into the county of federal funding. And so one of the things that's very important, of course, is for that money to be spent sagaciously. This is a $1.9 trillion package, again, more direct payments to Americans, more extended federal unemployment insurance, but this time also direct aid to state and local governments totaling $350 billion. Next slide, please. Now you can ask the question, are we being Dumbledore? Albus Dumbledore, of course, the headmaster of Hogwarts School. Hogwarts made famous by the Harry Potter books and movies. We approached the pandemic with a $23.5 trillion national debt. This chart suggests that the national debt is screaming towards $28 trillion. Actually, we're now past $28 trillion at around $28.6 trillion. This is of concern to Prince George's County. Because at some point, the federal government sees fit to start raising taxes on a wealthy county or to cut back federal spending in a county that does a lot of business with the federal government. This creates a long-term threat, probably the leading long-term threat to Prince George's County's prosperity. Next slide, please. Some other aspects of the pandemic. So one of the things that happened during the pandemic is that we really altered what we buy and how we buy it. Next slide, please. We suffered, for instance, a lot of retail bankruptcy last year. So here's a list of some of the retailers who went bankrupt last year. Pier 1 Imports goes bankrupt in February. True Religion goes bankrupt in April. They're the provider of those most excellent jeans that make everyone look slender. J. Crew, Neiman Marcus, JCPenney go bankrupt. GNC, the provider of those supplements that many of us take to build up our health, those pills. For instance, to build up our musculature, I pop those pills like crazy. I still have the arms of an accountant. Brooks Brothers, Lord & Taylor, they go bankrupt. Francesca's on December 3rd. But here's the thing. One could make the argument that last year was a pretty good year for retail activity. Next slide, please. This is monthly retail sales. Sorry, next slide, please. Go after this. One more. There you go. Monthly retail sales. And what it shows you is, yes, there was a period, you see a bit of a dip toward the right of the slide in retail sales that begins in February of 2020 and continues into March and April. So yes, there was a period when social distancing measures are being implemented and people are not going to malls, so on and so forth, that retail sales really dipped. But by June of last year, retail sales are above their pre-recession peak, and you can see they're really quite elevated. So, how do we reconcile that? The fact that we actually bought a lot of stuff last year because we couldn't take vacations, couldn't go see a ball game and spend $8 on a hot dog, couldn't go to the theater, so on and so forth. So we bought a lot of retail goods. But how do you reconcile that with all the retail bankruptcy? Well, of course, there are winners and losers in retail. Next slide, please. So, this is U.S. retail sales by type of business, February of 2020 versus June of 2021. Total retail sales over this period rose by 18%. At the very top, sporting goods, hobby, book, and music stores, the sales in that category rose 39.2%. Why? Sale of Peloton bikes. and other exercise equipment. If you couldn't go to the gym, people brought the gym into the house. And number two, the internet. That's Jeff Bezos and Amazon. That's e-commerce. We bought a lot of stuff online. Of course, we're stuck in our homes. That's one of the changes in behavior. Amazon became even more important as a company. Jeff Bezos had a very good year in 2020, not romantically, but from a business perspective, they picked up about 500,000 employees, and they've continued to hire more people this year. And of course, again, that headquarters becomes that much more important. And the blue line, therefore, which gives Prince George's County greater connectivity to that Amazon headquarters in Arlington, becomes that much more important. Now, at the very bottom, you can see the category that suffered the most during this period: food services and drinking places. That's a fancy way of saying restaurants and bars. So most human beings call that restaurants and bars. We economists call that food services and drinking places, which is one of the reasons that many of us have never been on a date. And then moving up a few categories, clothing and clothing accessory stores during the early stages of the pandemic really suffered. Not recently. Lots of people buying lots of clothes right now because they're going back outdoors. They're going on vacation. It's time to impress people once again. But during the pandemic, when we're stuck in our homes, many people were not buying clothing. Who are we trying to impress? Our families know what we look like. There's no fooling them. And so that lines up neatly with the bankruptcies of the likes of True Religion and JCPenney, J. Crew, others that depend upon apparel sales. Next slide, please. So let me talk about the housing market. I have about 4 or 5 more minutes here. This is going to be the blitz portion of the presentation. But if you're familiar with the Harry Potter books and movies, you know that any student admitted into Hogwarts is allocated into a house. Now, there's Hufflepuff, there's Gryffindor, and of course, Harry Potter is a member of Gryffindor. I'm from Baltimore. So every wizard from Baltimore is allocated into Ravenclaw. It's just the rule. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm just telling you what it is. If you're from Pittsburgh, you end up in Slytherin. Okay, so that's just the rule. If you don't like it, you can take it with Hogwarts administration. Next slide, please. One of the other aspects of the pandemic was that interest rates fell dramatically, and interest rates remain low despite the spike in inflation that we've been observing recently, most of which is transitory, not all. We might be able to talk more about that during Q&A. But you can see this is 15-year fixed mortgage rate in red, 30-year fixed mortgage rate in blue. I don't think it would surprise any member of this esteemed audience that home prices were rising prior to the crisis. Economy was good. Inventory of unsold homes is low. We're adding lots of jobs. Incomes are rising in the context of 50-year low in unemployment. Next slide, please. I think it can be viewed as somewhat surprising that the pace of home price appreciation has accelerated during the crisis. This is the S&P Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index. You can see what's been taking place with home prices. And of course, for many people who aspire to purchasing a home, this makes home purchasing that much more difficult. This widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Nonetheless, for people fortunate enough to own assets, whether stock portfolios or real estate coming into the pandemic, generally speaking, they have become wealthier during this moment of public health crisis. Next slide, please. One of the things that we are seeing, of course, is that the inventory of unsold homes is very low. In Prince George's County, it's less than 1 month. So just not enough homes out there. And this implicates things like zoning and permitting and so on and so forth to give more people opportunities to own a home, to live in Prince George's County, and to take advantage of what's likely to be a very rapidly growing economy going forward. Next slide, please. We are seeing a growth in residential building permits. The segment of interest here is the red segment, single unit structures. We have seen a little bit of backsliding recently in terms of single family building permits because of the growing price of softwood lumber and copper, gypsum, concrete slab, and other things that go into building a home. So, but nonetheless, even with that, single family permits remain above where they were pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. One of the things that we saw over the past year has been massive migration to the suburbs. So this red colored bar represents the 2 million people who moved out of principal cities last year. The blue colored bar represents the 3 million people who moved into suburbs last year, some from rural areas, some from urban areas, but the suburbs were the big winner. Obviously, Prince George's County is comprised of suburbs, and this push to the suburbs is likely to continue as the millennial generation, our largest generation, our most educated generation, comes of age. Next slide, please. We are observing or have observed major rent declines in principal cities. That's the left-hand column here. So between March and December of last year, the rents in San Francisco, apartment rents fell 27%. In Washington, 15%. Rents are not declining everywhere, but again, it's largely in those principal cities from which people have been out migrating. Next slide, please. This gives you another sense. The dark purple line represents the rent declines sustained, apartment rent declines sustained in principal cities over the 12 months of last year. The light purple line represents what's been happening in suburban cities. like the likes of Bowie, for instance. But I'm for Baltimore, so our suburban cities are the likes of Annapolis, Hunt Valley, Towson, Ellicott City, Columbia, Westminster, Bel Air, so on and so forth. That's not where the population is leaving. That's not where the rents are declining. It's largely been the principal cities. Now, what we're seeing is that some people are starting to move back into the cities, sometimes paying somewhat lower rent than they would have pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. Just want to talk about commercial real estate very briefly. Commercial real estate will be one of the last segments of the economy to recover. What this slide gets at are the 16 categories of non-residential construction and how much spending growth we saw in these categories between February of 2015 and February of 2020. Just want to point out two categories near the top. Office, we built a ton of office space just before this pandemic, and now of course we have the specter of remote work. And then lodging at number 3, that's hotel room construction. We built a lot of hotels just before we found out that we could actually have meetings productively on Zoom, for instance. I hope you're viewing this as productive. Next slide, please. Next, the same 16 sectors, but now this is for the period February 2020 through May of 2021, so the pandemic period. If you look for the bottom, you can see lodging, that's hotel room construction, is way down. If you look for the middle, office space construction is way down. And again, developers are unclear about what the future of commercial real estate is likely to be. Next slide, please. So now let me walk you into the forecast. Just give me a couple more minutes, and then we can take it up in Q&A. Let me do some crystal balling for you. Now look, we economists have a tendency to excessively complicate matters, and we do this on purpose. And the notion is that if you can't understand what we're saying, you will deem us to be highly intelligent. But in economics, there's basically two pieces. That's all you get: demand and supply. That's all there is. And in America, the principal source of demand is household spending. You've heard the statement a million times. The consumers, 2/3 of the economy. What they really are 2/3 of aggregate demand. So that consumers of such outsized importance, we don't just monitor what they're doing, what they're buying, how much they're buying, what prices they're paying. We actually also monitor their psychology. Next slide, please. For instance, the University of Michigan measures their consumer sentiment. And psychologically, the consumer is precisely where you think they would be, not as despondent as they were early in the pandemic, but not nearly as comfortable as they were pre-pandemic. And they're worried about things like a still high unemployment rate. They're worried about inflation. Food prices have been rising. Fuel prices have been rising. And they're wondering how long this will last. But I can make the argument to you, and I think this very much matters from the perspective of the Economic Development Commission, Prince George's County Chamber members, so on and so forth, business people generally. I can make the argument that household finances have never been in better shape in America. Now, look, at some level, that sounds very insensitive. I know, and you know, a lot of people lost their health insurance when they needed it most during the pandemic. I know, and you know, that a lot of people are facing evictions as these various moratoria expire. I know, and you know, that a lot of people can't keep up with their student loans or their credit card debt and so on and so forth. A lot of people are facing food insecurity now in America, all of that. Next slide, please. But if you look macroeconomically, microeconomically, there are lots of families hurting. But macroeconomically, the American household, on average, looks like they're in pretty good shape. This is the US savings rate. This is savings as a percentage of personal disposable income. So coming into the pandemic, the US savings rate was around 8%. You know, basically a reflection of how much money people take out of their paychecks every couple of weeks and set aside into some account. Could be checking, savings, 401k, but they're not spending it right away. That's the point. By April of last year, that's a big peak you see here, the savings rate is 33.0%. People are trapped in their homes. Income is still coming to the household, whether it's in the form of stimulus, their jobs, stepped-up unemployment insurance benefits. So that the savings build up on the household balance sheet. Now, as the economy reopens and fits and starts, and spring opportunities reemerge, you can now go to a ball game. Those savings start to expenditures. We have that V-shaped recovery. But as late as May of 2021, the savings rate is still a lofty 12.4%. Households collectively in America saved an excess $2.6 trillion during the pandemic. And that's money that's ready to be spent. But here's the thing. You might say, well, Anirban, we're still stuck with high unemployment in Prince George's County, particularly among certain groups. There just feels like the economy seems to be hesitating. Here comes the Delta variant. Everything is not taking off the way we might like. Well, remember, as indicated by the great rapper Rob Bass in 1988, it takes two to make a thing go right. Now, I know what you're going to say to me. Anirban, that also involved the efforts of one DJ Easy Rock. You're right. It was a duo. Of course, it takes two to make a thing go right. Unfortunately, DJ Easy Rock passed in 2014 due to diabetic seizure, proving yet again that it takes two to make a thing go right, but only one to make things go terribly wrong. In any case, Demand is fine. Demand is strong. Next slide, please. It's the supply side of the economy that's not functioning perfectly. You've heard of all these global supply chain disruptions, but also one of the things that we have is underconfident small businesses across America. This is the National Federation of Independent Businesses Index of Small Business Optimism. Question, Small Business America, is it a good time to expand your business over the next 3 months? In June, only 15% of small business operators said yes. They're nervous about inflation, can't find the right workers are too expensive. In many cases, they're hoarding cash. So again, it takes two to make a thing go right, and we're not quite there yet. Next slide, please. My last slide, as it turns out. For an economy to flourish, both demand and supply sides of the economy must participate. With ongoing stimulus, demand gets a further boost, but supply continues to be constrained by numerous factors, and not just America. We have these supply chain disruptions. Whether it's wars in the Middle East or the Suez Canal blockage or whatever it happens to be. And sometimes things happen in America. Texas loses electricity for a week, impacting petrochemicals, for instance. So the supply side, supply chains are just in disarray. The result is that the US savings rate in the short term will remain elevated, and that will continue to springload the economy for rapid economic growth once vaccines become more broadly available. It is still the case, however, even with all these supply chain issues, even with the Delta variant, even with inflation, the demand part of the economy is so strong, and suppliers have such an incentive to try to rise up to meet that demand, that the back half of 2021 should be spectacular for economic growth. I'll still stand by that. This economy will still manage to grow around 7% this year, the US economy. However, there will be a day of reckoning one day, as deficit hawks come back into fashion, meaning that I was taught in economics, there's no free lunch. And anyone who's spent time with David Iannucci knows that to be the case. There's no free lunch. And so we've been handing out a lot of free lunches lately, putting a lot of money into the economy, but not paying for it really. We're running massive deficits. And at some point, we're going to pay that back. It's not literally in some other form, a bond market crisis, so on and so forth. But that's not the story for 2021. That's not the story for 2022, where the yield on the 10-year treasury right now is 1.3%. So many people willing to hold U.S. treasuries right now and lend the government money. So that's not the issue right now. Look forward to a great back half of the year. Let's go to Q&A. Yes, thank you very much. And let's see what questions we have from this audience. Any questions? Am I by myself now?
No, you're there.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I don't see any questions either, but one of the questions I'm asking is, and I get asked, Anirban, is when will Prince George's County have recovered the jobs we had lost? I only have the 2020 fourth quarter numbers that say we lost 31,000 jobs for 2020. I'm convinced since January to now, we've recovered a substantial number of those. I just don't have that data. As you know, the county data lags. But I'm assuming we're still down another 15,000 or so jobs in an economy where it took us 6 years to add 25,000 jobs. So am I looking at 2022, 23, 24 to get back to where I was?
I think so. I think, my best estimate for Prince George's County is that the county returns to its pre-pandemic level of employment by early 2023. It will return, the nation might return to its pre-pandemic employment level by mid to late 2022. But Prince George's County, because there are so many dislocated restaurant and hotel and other workers, and a lot of restaurants have closed. And what does that mean? That means that new restaurants have to open. Well, that takes time. It takes time to, to develop the site. It takes time. It takes time to line up financing, all those kinds of things, to print up menus, all those things, or get the QR codes, whatever it happens to be. And so we need a lot of entrepreneurship to get back to where we were. I think next year and the balance of this year, you'll see tons of entrepreneurship. You'll see a shocking number of new restaurants opening. That's Prince George's County entrepreneurs bringing this economy back to life. But because of the massive level of dislocation, I would not expect to see the pre-pandemic level of employment until 2023. So that's 3 years after the pandemic began. That's a big deal.
It's a big deal. We do have a couple other questions here, as you can see. The question that for you about what sectors do you see as having the greatest growth opportunity for Prince George's County?
Yeah, you always have to say technology, right? So when you're between the National Security Administration, the NSA, and the bulk of the federal government, it's got to be about technology. It's got to be about cybersecurity, electronics, e-commerce, so on and so forth. That's where the future is. I think Prince George County, by the way, could be a major center for manufacturing. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing, and we've been seeing since 2010, is lots of reshoring of manufacturing production back to the United States of America. And if anything, the pace of reshoring will accelerate because of the pandemic, because so many US CEOs are tired of these supply chain disruptions, but also people who want to better protect intellectual property, so on and so forth. Prince George's County has developable land. I know somebody talked about data centers early on, but that land can be used for many, many purposes. It has a workforce, but here is the principal problem for US manufacturing: skilled workers. There are not enough machinists and not enough welders, not enough people who can work with heavy equipment. And if Prince George's County, including via its community college, but also Bowie State University and other institutions of higher education, could train that 21st century manufacturing workforce, I think you'll see a surprising number of manufacturers locate to Prince George's County. So there are many growth opportunities, but always it's the higher end or the cutting edge of industries, because Prince George's County is a fairly expensive place in which to operate. And so you need to be in in industries that have pretty thick profit margins and lots of demand for human capital.
One of the questions I get is about the high unemployment rate, but at the same time, the high number of jobs that are available, and commentary that people might be staying out of the labor force or not seeking because of all the federal unemployment benefits they're getting. I'll give you my personal sense that a lot of restaurant workers decided that they were tired of lousy pay, customers that irritated them, and bosses that were paying in the whatever. And they decided they maybe had a different idea. What do you as an economist have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, there's this big debate in the economics community about whether or not it matters what the level of unemployment insurance benefits are in terms of the intensity of people's job searches. My personal view is, and I say that as an economist who had to make payroll today, I think that it affects people's decision making. And that what we have observed in other parts of the world is that when unemployment insurance benefits are generous, people's intensity of job search declines. Now, these stepped-up unemployment insurance benefits end on September 6th, and there's some other things happening. So when kids come back for in-person instruction, the presumption is that many moms and dads will be able to therefore finally come back full force into the labor market. So what I would expect to see is, and this is one of the reasons that I'm so optimistic about the outlook for the latter half of 2021, a lot of parents are going to come back to the labor force, and we'll end up adding a lot of jobs in the process, as a lot of these job openings are finally filled, whether at restaurants, hotels, or in other segments of the economy. So that's what I would say to you. I think we're ready for some really big months of job growth. As normalcy begins to rear its head, I am worried about the Delta variant like everybody else. And I know that a lot of people have been scared of vaccinations, and so they're fully vulnerable. So that's an issue, and that will take some of the edge off this economic expansion during the latter half of the year. Nonetheless, we need to get more people back into the labor force. I'm frustrated that the labor force participation rate in America is only 61.6%. I'm frustrated that we still have 9.2 million available unfilled jobs in America. I would have loved to have seen those filled more quickly during the summer months. This is a busy time for restaurants and hotels, so on and so forth, but that's where we're going to be, that's where we are. But later this year, you'll see, I think, another pickup in job growth.
I think you got a question there in the Q&A about, can you see that?
I don't, David.
It said lots of news recently regarding investors buying single-family homes and home builders doing rent single-family home communities. Do you see that? I guess the investment issue on homing and rentals and so forth.
Yes, I see that now. So I was looking at the chat box as opposed to Q&A box. So yes, great question. So yes, we are seeing corporations come in and buy up lots of single-family homes. We already have a dearth of inventory. We have an affordability problem. In markets like Austin, Texas, Tesla, for instance, is buying up homes as they become available for its workforce, which is growing in the Austin area and other parts of Texas. So what can I tell you? Housing market's hot, and it's when the corporations get involved that you might start to get bubble type activity, speculative activity. I still believe, though, that we don't have a housing market bubble. And that's because supply falls well short of demand. And so, again, this is a reason why, at least in Prince George's County, housing policy is so important. And housing policy is often restrictive, and it keeps people away from opportunity. It keeps prices artificially inflated. And a lot of people don't like density. So a lot of politicians like to downzone development, so on and so forth. Well, what that does, of course, is it increases inequality. It diminishes opportunity for the broader segment or a broader segment of the population. So anyway, these policies are very important. Corporations are getting involved because they can see these home prices are rising. They can see the scarcity, and that adds to the scarcity, probably helps push up prices faster in the near term. At some point, of course, as mortgage rates start to rise, we'll start to see these prices level out. And then Marilyn asked the question, it seems like a chicken and the egg question. We need skilled workers, but don't have them because manufacturing was encouraged to move overseas. So everyone went to college and got degrees in finance and services. You're so right, Marilyn. That's exactly what happened. And so we've got to reverse that, because here's the thing. A lot of parents in particular have become indoctrinated, believing that there's only one real pathway into the American middle class or better, and that's a four-year college degree. But we're all different as human beings. We all have our different strengths. Somewhere out there, this fall, there'll be a kid studying French literature. He'll be studying, or she'll be studying Sartre, Molière, Camus, so on and so forth, and hating every moment of it. But they would be potentially the greatest carpenter in the world. They just don't know it because they've never were exposed to that. And they'd be a great carpenter because they love carpentry. They just don't know that. So we've got to expose more kids and more parents to more opportunities to enter the middle class. We all have our strengths, or better. But we've got our strengths, and we need to play to them. But a lot of people have been convinced that, well, the only path for me is a four-year college degree. And for many of us, of course, that has been the path to success, but not for everyone. So we need to broaden that. And again, manufacturing and construction, for instance, those goods producing industries represent pathways that don't always involve a four-year college degree, but often involve middle-class wages and entrepreneurial opportunities. Another person asked the question, nationally and locally, where do you see the largest growth potential? Yeah, again, it's got to be technology. I mean, I guess that answer is almost always true, but it's e-commerce, it's cyber, it's robotics, it's RFID tags, it's all kinds of things. Often it's not about creating the next technology, though that's wonderful to do, but it's taking existing technologies and then creating some kind of application around them. That's what Uber and Lyft are. There's nothing especially inventive from a technological perspective about that. There's a nice app, of course, but it's about taking existing technologies, GPS and other technologies, connecting people together, and now you have these multi-billion-dollar companies. Another question, Prince George's County has a strong higher education community. You better believe it does. Obviously home to the flagship college of University of the University System of Maryland, but also Bowie State, a very ambitious campus, as well as Prince George's Community College. A strong community college and more. How do you see those institutions impacting Prince George's County and its economic future? It's a center of human capital. Now, one of the things that we see is that College Park in particular is a leader in engineering education and engineering research. And so I'm not sure why we don't have more companies come out of College Park and locate in Prince George's County in its backyard. Now, what I see is a lot of the entrepreneurs that come out of College Park, including, for instance, one of the co-founders of Oculus, often move to Silicon Valley. And somehow we've got to figure this ecosystem issue out so that more of our entrepreneurs stay here. But you say, three major USM institutions, strong community college, all of that is absolutely correct. And so, University of Maryland Global Center, for instance, all of that is there. So that's one of the reasons Prince George's County's outlook is so good, is because it is in some sense the Athens of Maryland. And then Lori Valentine asked the question, on entrepreneurship, as entrepreneurship ramps up, what about access to capital? Well, always an issue, obviously. And there's been a big debate about to whom capital is available and to whom it is not. Look, what we have right now are a lot of banks competing for people's business. And I'm a believer in the free market. I'm not suggesting there isn't discrimination, historically or otherwise, contemporaneously. But banks or financiers who see a good opportunity and don't bank it or finance it are not profit maximizers. And I believe that in that sense, greed is good. So if you've got somebody from a minority community or any community who's got a great idea, whether in Prince George's County or Silicon Valley or on the Boston I-128 corridor, a good idea is a good idea, or a Research Triangle in Raleigh-Durham. A good idea is a good idea, and ultimately, I would think it would be financed. But again, perhaps that's naive. And with that, I don't see any other open questions, and so I'll give it back to the host. Thank you very much, Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation, for the invitation. Thank you again to Southern Management for its sponsorship. And once again, I'm all by myself.
No, Anirban, you're not all
There you
by
are. There you go, David.
No, you're not all by yourself. And terrific presentation. I was wondering if we can get copies of the slides, because I think they were brilliant, and give us a really good view of where we are and what we need to do to build an economy. I would say also, if I could make a comment here, that it's interesting that we have a dynamic where we still have a need for job growth, but also have this but workers are taking their time and returning to the marketplace, I think for a variety of reasons that pertain to what I would call, family personal decisions, like childcare, like did I make the right decision in taking on the job that I initially had during the pandemic? And so seeing how these decisions play out, I think will be very interesting as we recover from this. So we'll certainly be back in touch with you to see how we're recovering and what other adjustments we need to make from a policy perspective to see how we recover. So thank you very much. Appreciate you. So I'd just like to thank everybody for being on this important conversation. As the Prince George's Chamber of Commerce and the voice of wealth creation, we're always looking at new strategies and innovation to bring information to you so that you could begin to rethink your business in a way that how we gear it toward wealth. I'd like to thank personally David Iannucci, the President and CEO of the Economic Development Corporation, for his wonderful partnership, and certainly look forward to these very informative webinars that really help us with think about business. So thank you, David, and thank you for being a champion of business. Certainly, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Lori Valentine for her incredible work and bringing this together as well. I also like to thank Tom Farrisee, who is just a remarkable leader in the chamber, and also is pushing the edge for us to really bring forth great information. So Tom, thank you very much. And Adenia Bradley, to your leadership, your fantastic leadership. And with the Economic Development Committee, and we being a sponsor of this event with Southern Management, thank you so much, Tom and Adenia, for your tremendous support. To Shaka Reed, I want to thank you as the Chamber's Business Development Manager. Thank you for being part of the team that put this together as well. And we really want to appreciate you. We at the Chamber are very, very proud of connecting with Economic Development Corporation and putting this on, and stay tuned for future events that will provide you with some information. I would say this about this conversation, that this conversation is indeed vital, particularly as we get into the Delta variant and the uncertain, and maybe getting back to a period of uncertainty. We need to sort of come together collectively as a business community to look at the ways that the federal government can help us really with future investment, that those investments are passed down to the state and the county in a way to help sustain business, and really begin to be mindful of all the lessons that we learned from the pandemic and how we're able to maintain business. Business is key, and the growth of business is vital to Prince George's County in a way that fuels our infrastructure, both on the nonprofit sector and the public sector, and a way it provides jobs in a way that keeps people home. And so David Iannucci and I are always in regional, federal, and certainly local meetings that begin to have some very salient conversations around then uplifting business. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for being on this call. We appreciate you. Contact information is being on the is coming up to the chat. And I also like to thank, if my dear friend is still on, Jarryd. Thank you, Jarryd, for your leadership, and also to the tremendous leadership of Senator Ben Cardin. We really appreciate him and you and your work in what you're doing in Prince George's County and throughout the state. My email address, I'll type it in right now. If anybody wants to send me information, is dharrington@pgcoc.org. And we'd appreciate any information. We hope that you would consider the chamber as some place where you can at least be a part of what we do. And we have a slide here of all of us that have participated in this program. I'm going to say one more thing, and this might be off program, but I'm going to take the prerogative anyway. Please get vaccinated. The Delta variant right now, we need to get vaccinated. The unvaccinated, folks who are unvaccinated are part of the carriers now, this new Delta variant. And as the numbers spike, we are returning to a time where we had to close down business, where our economy, as David Iannucci would tell you, went from the #1 job creator in the state to now, as you saw in the slide, to 24th in unemployment, excuse me. And so we need to now speak as a community to get rid of this virus. You notice that right now we're not talking about polio anymore, or we're not talking about the flu. And you know why? Because there were vaccines around that helped us have so-called immunity from these diseases. That's not to say if you get a shot, you may not get the flu. That's not the point. The point is that getting this vaccine will help you in a way that will stop being a spreader of this important Delta virus. So please, I say on behalf of myself, and certainly I'm sure others on this call would join me, get vaccinated. And right now is the easiest time. You can almost walk into any church, any drugstore, I see signs to get vaccinated all over the place. And the business community stands ready to provide you even more places to get vaccine. So this, as Jarryd just said in this Delta variant right now is the biggest threat to our economy and the biggest threat to business and the biggest threat to our livelihood. Let's get vaccinated now, so that then we can get back to real normalcy, real vibrancy, and real certainty. So thank you for the brief time to share that with you. And on behalf of the Prince George's Chamber of Commerce, and to David Iannucci on the Economic Development Corporation, and to all those who played the leadership role in putting this together, have a wonderful weekend. Take care. And this certainly concludes our program. Lori, I don't know if I needed to do anything else, but or just let people sign
You're
off.
perfect. Thank you so much. We're going to stop the recording.
Thank you.
Panelists, please stand